Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be doing something kind of different. Today we're going to be doing a travel tips video about going to Japan. This was requested by a lot of people over the last couple of years, so I'm finally doing it. Now, the other thing is, I assume this video will be watched largely by a percentage of people who do not know what my channel is, who are not regulars here, they're just looking for travel tips. So to those people, welcome. But you also, to those people, need to understand my channel is largely about retro video games, and so there's going to be a lot of that seeded throughout, about collecting video games and stuff like that. But the advice I'm going to give you is going to be very general as anyone who wishes to visit Japan as a tourist. In case you're wondering what my possible credentials for something like this are, being a YouTuber has opened a lot of doors for me as far as being an influencer and getting to go to events and things like that. So as a result, I've been in 27 countries at the age of 32. I've been to Japan 8 times in the last 2 years. So it's, in fact, the last time I was there at the time of making this video was only about 2 weeks ago. So I do have some information that hopefully will be helpful to people out there who are going to Japan for the first time and just kind of curious what the process is like. So the first thing I want to say is the things you need to know before you ever get on the plane. So first and foremost, let's get the cultural stuff out of the way. There's a lot of perception of what Japan must be like as someone who's never been there before, about intimidation with language barriers and things like that. We'll get into that kind of stuff, but basically you don't have to worry about that as long as you speak English. You know, like I said, we'll get back around to that. If you speak English, and you must because you're watching this video, you'll be fine. Other things to note is like your cell phone. Make sure that you've updated that in advance. Like call your cell phone provider. Personally, I have a Google Pixel and I have Verizon as my data carrier. So all I had to do is get a data travel package plan, and that allows me to go to like any number of countries that they support, and I'm able to go to them and just instantly have my phone work with no consequences. And the only exception to that I've been to is Cuba, but that's kind of a special exception. But anyway, you got to do that type of thing. Make sure your phone works because your phone is a lifeline in another country. Second, make sure you contact your credit card company and let them know you're planning to do this type of thing. Because if you do that, often they won't stop transactions, and the same goes for your bank with your ATM card. They won't stop transactions that they see over there. And on top of that, a lot of the time, especially credit card companies, will waive those foreign transaction fees by giving them kind of a heads up. At least I know mine does. So those are some pro tips to save you a little money and to reduce the amount of stress you might endure when you actually get there. So, but let's go back to the cultural stuff, because there is some cultural stuff that you do need to know. And beyond just little things like we'll get into later. The big cultural thing that you need to understand, and I say this from the perspective of being an American tourist. I've made friends who live there who are not Japanese. I know people who go there a lot, and we all run into the same situation, which is the Japanese are wonderful, lovely people. You can go and visit, you can spend money, but you gotta leave. You're never gonna be one of them. And they'll always kind of isolate you. You will always feel isolated in Japan, away from them, which will have both advantages and disadvantages that we can get into later. But what that kind of means is the Japanese, like I said, they're very nice, but they do have this Japan first mentality, which is, it's fine. That's their country. That's how they are. But what that means is if you're not from Japan, if you're Asian, you're Chinese automatically. Like that's the other country that they respect. They obviously are not stupid. They're aware that there's other countries, but like the go-to instinct is, oh, non-Asian, or Asian who's not Japanese, Chinese. And if you're white, you're an American. And if you're anything else, you might be some kind of American. Other countries don't really exist too much over there. They're novelty ideas. I know that sounds fucked up, I'm aware, but I'm just telling you what the perspective is. And the perception upon them is typically like, if you're not Japanese, you're either American or Chinese. The other countries aren't. Oh, that's interesting. And unlike, say, I know there's a stereotype about like when Canadians go to Europe, they want to make sure everyone knows they're Canadian so that they don't come off as Americans because nobody likes Americans, whatever. But in Japan, that's not the case. They love Americans over there, so it's actually in your best interest to do that. And I say this also because the instinct, the assumption is if you're not Japanese and you're not Asian, you just speak English, no matter what. That's one of the reasons. And no, that doesn't mean you're from England. It means you're an American. I know it sounds stupid and you won't understand it until you actually go through that experience, until you get there. But trust me, it'll be a thing. I know it sucks. It sounds awkward to even bring it up. It's not a bad thing. It's just something that I think people need to be aware of. The Japanese don't care what country you're from. They just assume if you're not from there, you're from China or you're from America. End of discussion. So own it, don't own it, that's up to you. So, obviously, again, we're talking about language barriers and all that type of stuff. Everything there is pretty dual language when it comes to the train system. Now, I've spent a lot of time in Osaka and Tokyo, a little bit of time in Kyoto, and never had any sort of problem getting around or communicating. You should learn some basic phrases. We'll get back to that type of thing. But let's just kind of go through this in a timeline type of manner, shall we? As if we're just taking off and we're landing. Now, again, this comes from the perspective of an American. As an American, I do not require any sort of special visa to enter Japan. I can just go, land, show up, and they're totally okay with that. I have a legal maximum of 90 days within a year. This would apply to any of you who are visiting for the purposes of tourism to stay in Japan. After that, you legally must leave. Now, you don't have to use the full 90, of course. You can just go for like a week and then come back if you ever want to. Whatever it is, you have 90 days maximum within a calendar year. So we take off, we're in the air, we land. Now during the flight, you have been handed a couple of cards, basically ID cards, or not, well, landing cards. There's two of them. One is specifically for customs declaration and the other is for passport control. You must fill out both. And make sure to check the back. A lot of people don't do that, and the back, especially on the little landing card for passport control, requires the right answers as opposed to doing like check boxes. Simple stuff. It's like, what plane did you come from? What's your passport number? All that type of stuff. The one thing they are serious sticklers on, though, is knowing a hotel or address you will be at. They will not let you pass, even try to get to passport control without something written there. There must be a phone number and there must be an address. Now, they never verify it. They never contact anybody. They never do any of that stuff. So if you don't have a solid plan, which you should have a solid plan first, if you don't, you can just look up any hotel, put a number and an address. You'll be okay, at least for that initial part, but whatever. So anyway, you can do all that stuff. Now, when you land, you'll be kind of escorted. You know, just follow the signs. Everything, like I said, is dual language in English. You will be fine being able to get to passport control. When you're there, there's a first. I've kind of memorized Narita, Tokyo, better than the other airports, but that one basically you go through and there's a whole bunch of different options. There's Japanese, citizens, and there's Japanese residents and all that type of stuff. There's diplomats, all that fun stuff. You probably don't apply to any of this. So you have to go to foreign passport, which is generally all the way at the back. And it's usually the busiest one because it applies to like every other country in the world. So you go through that, and the Japanese, you will understand, are very regimented. They have a thing where they just like, we have our way, we do it our way. You can either do it our way with us or you can leave. Those are your choices. And you'll find that's just kind of a theme throughout Japan. And this may sound intimidating, but I promise you it's not. These are all like, oh, okay, that wasn't really that bad, or oh, that really makes a lot of sense. Like, you'll get past it, but it's just a cultural thing. Like, we have our way, you go with it, or leave. Like, that's just how it is. But their way, honestly, a lot of time makes a lot more sense. But in this case, so what you have to do is you follow this first line. There's always a dude working there who always speaks English. Everyone in that whole section always speaks English. Well, we'll get back to that. Maybe not always, but the guys who are trying to navigate you to stuff speak English. And they'll get you to go through this first line. Now, the first line, you just wait there and you get up to this machine that basically, they scan your passport, they take your fingerprints, and they take a photo of you. I gotta be honest, like I said, 27 countries, including the US. I've never seen another country do this the way Japan does. Like I said, they do everything their own way. But you do this first line, and the funniest part about that, at least, sidetracking here a little bit, in my perspective, my experience, my passport has only worked twice out of the 8 times I've ever landed in Japan. I don't know why. The first time and this most recent time. Don't know why. But they apparently, after the Fukushima thing, they went to a low HVAC power system, and my buddy thinks that's probably why they have problems reading these things. That said, I got through that part a couple of times, and even if you can't get through it, they don't really seem to care. They're like, they literally say, I can't make it work, and then they just send you to the second line. So the first part, kind of pointless. But anyway, you do it because you just do it. So you go to the second line, and there's a guy there who will stop you and check your little landing card to make sure you filled out the hotel and phone number. This is where that comes into effect. After that's good, you move on your way. And then you get around to a point where you're about to go to security, or not security, but passport control, like the formal version. You know, that thing you memorize or envision when somebody stamps your passport. You get to that point. There will be a guy there who tries to, you know, have some sort of structure to this whole thing. So it'll be like, okay, go to number 4, go to 32, go to 12, and go to that one, you know, whatever. Generally, just do what they say because you have no reason to be a jerk about it. But if for some reason it's open and you have kind of a choice, here's a suggestion. There's always multiple people working there. And if you can, find an old guy. An old guy is tired. He wants to go home. He's been doing this forever. He probably doesn't speak English all that well. Doesn't really want to be doing this. His objective is to scan your passport, make sure you're not a terrorist, stamp you, and get you out of there. The one you never want to go to, again, if you have a choice, is a young woman. And how this was explained to me was young women in Japan have to prove themselves a lot of the time. So as a result, a young woman's got a lot of energy, and she has to prove she's just as good as the men in that position. So she's going to be the one who's going to try the hardest to ask you a bunch of questions, see why you're there. Not that you have anything to hide, it just slows down the process, and it's intimidating and frankly kind of annoying. So I recommend, if possible, to try and go ahead and find an old guy. But to be honest with you, I've never once had a problem getting through this part. When I say that, I mean like as far as, oh, we can't let you in or anything like that. The most problems I've ever had, like I said, they sometimes have a problem reading my passport. So what happens is they'll take it, they can't get it to work, they'll type in everything manually, they get annoyed, and after they make it work like manually, they just tell me to go. Now the reason this doesn't make any sense is even when the passport works, or when they get it to work by typing it in manually, you still have to scan your fingerprints, you still have to take the photo. So that first part is kind of pointless. Japan has a tendency as a culture to want to, obviously like most, want to avoid homelessness. So they want to employ people as much as possible. So in Japan, they kind of make up jobs that don't really need to exist just to make sure people are employed, which is a little side thing. Like you will see people, especially at train stations and stuff, there will be some old guy who's just like holding a sign. Like the equivalency of a stop sign. Like a literal metal stop sign could do his job. It's literally always there, but they pay a guy to stand there and do it so that he's working. You'll notice weird stuff like that. I mean, like I said, we do it our way, but it actually kind of makes sense that way. And you don't really see many Japanese homeless people because everybody's got a job. But whatever, that doesn't matter. So you get through security, you get your little stamp, which is interesting. I've never seen another country do this. Japan doesn't do the traditional stamp that you envision. What they do is they take a sticker and then they print it and then they place that like a literal mail stamp into your passport. So you have that, and that'll be important later for people who want to buy stuff. We'll get back to that. But you take that passport, you're good. You've been cleared to the first part. Now you're in a second area, and the second area is basically where you pick up your luggage. Now if you checked any bags through, this is where you have to get them. And you have to get them before you leave. Because once you go through the customs declaration, you can't go back to get them. So make sure you pick them up. So once you have your bags, you go to the carousel, all that stuff, go to customs declaration. Japanese customs declaration, again, kind of works their own way. Unlike, say, the European Union or the United States or Canada, customs declaration in those places, you kind of just voluntarily walk through an area that either says like yes or no. I have something to declare, I don't have something to declare. Not the case with Japan. They stop everyone and they ask you questions, they look at your bags. My bags have never been opened or checked or anything like that, but they take your passport, they look for the stamp that was given before, that's when you need the customs card, you give them that. That guy will ask you questions because he's going to double check information, I guess, but it's usually like, how long are you here? Why are you here? That type of, again, basic stuff. Just as long as you're there for legitimate tourism, you're not going to have a problem. But anyway, so never say you're there for work, because unless you are actually there for work and you have some sort of piece of paper proving you're there for work, but that's different than tourism, so this, again, not the purpose of this video. But fine, I've got my bags, I'm all good, get through. Then at that point, you are in Japan. So you're set. Now, there's a few things you're going to want to do if this is your first time in Japan. Now, most of my advice will come as someone who's landed primarily at Narita Airport in Tokyo. But this would apply to any of the major landing spots like Kansai in Osaka or Haneda in Tokyo as well. What you're going to want to do is try to get to your hotel, logically. Now, I'm going to use Tokyo as an example, okay? Now, generally when I'm in Tokyo, I try to stay at Yokohama or Yokosuka. Shenmue, hey. So if I can, that's typically the areas I want to be in. Now, Narita, you have to understand, if you're landing in Narita is really far away from Tokyo. It's actually like an entirely different community. Calling it Tokyo is being really generous. The reason for that, doesn't really matter, I guess. Tokyo is the biggest city in the world, and it was expanding in one direction, and they wanted to try and force population growth the other way because there was a bunch of farmland up there. They're like, we can build stuff here and be less congested. So they built the airport up there thinking, stuff would follow. It never did. So as a result, it's just really far away. It takes like an hour and a half, maybe longer, to get down to the city. So when you land, plan to do nothing that evening except get to the hotel. So we'll go through that process. But one of the first things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pick up a Suica card. And unfortunately, in order to do that, you will also need to hit up an ATM. Now, my policy on ATMs is never do this at the airport. But if this is your first time there, this is sadly something you're going to have to do. But there is a way out of this, sort of. Do not use a currency exchange. Don't go to, if you live in the US or whatever, don't go to a bank or something beforehand. Don't go to a currency exchange beforehand and be like, I'm going to pick up some yen. Terrible idea. You will pay way more doing that than you would if you just landed and do what I'm about to tell you, which is when you land, Japanese ATMs at convenience stores are the best. They're like a perfect, like they're super easy. I've never had any issues with it. And in my case, I mean, you have to call your bank about this, like I said before, but your bank will often waive the transaction fee. Like mine will show a transaction fee and then I'll get a refund back from my bank. And it's usually like $2, but they give it back to me. Again, you have to talk to your bank about such things, but yeah, as opposed to the currency exchange fee, which will be astronomical. Do not do that. That's a fool's game. So when you land, this is the one time I ever suggest going to an ATM at an airport. There's always a 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven, infamous American chain, not actually American. It's actually Japanese. It's called 7 & I Holdings. They bought it from us a long time ago. Fun fact. Find one of those and look for an ATM. Typically, when it comes to the ATM, you have a few options. For reference, this is a 1,000 yen bill. Might seem intimidating. This is basically $10. Not even. This is more like $9.80. If even that, maybe like $9.50. It's really not that much. So the Japanese keep their currency around 108 yen to $1. The goal being try to keep 100 yen to $1-ish. It's basically $1, then shave a little bit off. That's pretty much the goal. So again, as an American, it's pretty easy to remember. Just basically move a decimal place and you're good to go. That's really all that is. It's really not that intimidating when you think about it. So hit up an ATM, and then I would say get no more than maybe 10,000 yen, which again is about $100. You probably will never need that much, but that's like a good comfort amount. And you will not get robbed in Japan. In Japan, the idea of theft, cash theft, is just, it's an abomination. It's like a morally reprehensible thing. Like I remember one time I landed there, I actually had a 10,000 yen bill on me that I dropped and I did not notice. And a dude actually picked it up, he noticed and he tapped me on the shoulder and he's like, "Sumimasen," and he handed this to me. And I was like, oh wow, like they're super legit about cash. Like it is not cool to steal money. So it's totally okay to walk around with tons of cash. Personally, I hate cash and we'll get back to that. But yes, at this phase in your trip, go to an ATM and probably get about the equivalency of $100, which is about 10,000 yen. So at that point, what you're going to want to do is go off and find what is known as a Suica card. Now, a Suica card is this little card that I've got right here, which I have inside of actually I picked this up in Japan. This is a case holder specifically for a Suica card. Now, a Suica card is one of many options. There's also Passmo, and there's a few other brands, but basically these are train and public transit cards. I cannot stress enough, this thing is magic. Do not leave the airport without one of these. Look for a little penguin. That's the Suica logo. There's also Passmo. There's tons of machines around. If you're confused, you can always ask people, especially at the airport, they speak English. But you're going to want to look around and get one of these cards. So these cards are great because what you do is you take it and you load it into one of these machines, and the machine will accept cash. You have to understand, Japan is a very cash-based country. They've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. They're inviting tourists in more, so credit cards are becoming more prominent. But not in this area. In this area, your equivalency of a credit card is the Suica card. You trust me when I say, when you go through all these trains, you're not going to want to sit there and deal with all sorts of coins and all this crap. You're not going to want to do that. So what I recommend is take your Suica card, put it in the machine. The machines are dual language. They're in Japanese initially, but there's always an English menu. You press that, English will come up. And what you want to do is load the Suica card with however much money you feel comfortable putting on there. Personally, I wouldn't recommend having more than $50 on there. Mine has about 50 bucks on there right now, actually. So for whenever I go back, it's ready to go. So you can keep the other, $50 or so on you, plus you'll have this card loaded. Now at that point, you're pretty much good to go if you want to take the train system out of Narita. Now, this is optional, but I'm going to throw this out there. If your goal is to get to something like Yokohama or Yokosuka or even Haneda, like whatever it is, you have multiple options leaving Narita, but there's train systems, which again I recommend throughout the majority of the country, but specifically when coming out of Narita, the one thing you might really want to look into is the Kaikyo limousine bus line. As soon as you exit the initial arrivals area from International, there's this area for the Kaikyo bus line. It's a little expensive. It's like $35, but they go to a ton of very specific destinations that are really far away from Narita. Yes, it would cost you less on a train, but odds are you would have to change multiple times to get where you want, and it would not be as efficient. The reason I love that bus line, I don't care that it's more expensive, it is so much less stressful. You buy your ticket, you go outside, very nice system. They tell you okay, this is the platform you're on, this is the time of your bus. You just go over to that platform and you wait for the bus. Not a problem. A couple of dudes will take your bags, they'll put a little tag on it, they'll put it underneath the bus, you get on the bus, you're in an air-conditioned bus, usually by yourself, and you can just relax knowing this bus is going to take you straight to your destination. I can't recommend it enough. It's so much nicer. But again, factor in time. Because in Japan, it's a train-based culture when it comes to travel. It is not about buses. It is not about cars. Do not even consider a taxi or an Uber unless you make it rain these things. Because they are super, super expensive. I mean, cabs are a luxury item. I once looked into that possibility for a very short distance, and it was something like $200, and I was like, I'm good. Cabs there, they literally wear white gloves. It's that posh of an experience. Do not take a cab, do not think about Uber. Trains are your best friend, but when it comes out of leaving from Narita, take the Kaikyo bus line down to Yokohama or wherever you gotta go, and just, once you're in the major section of the city, you'll be fine with trains, I promise you. You will not be able to pay for the Kaikyo bus line with the Suica card, but you can use a credit card. So keep that in mind. Now, I also recommend that while you're at the airport, you can hit up one of the convenience stores, get yourself a little bit of food, some drinks. There's a lot of good stuff in there. You can grab that stuff and then have it for you for the drive. And that way you have a nice relaxing drive. I seriously recommend that. I know it's more expensive. I know people try to go as cheap as they can. Trust me, cheapness will come later. Do yourself a favor, reduce the stress. Just enjoy the ride, especially if you're landing from Narita. If you're landing from Kansai in Osaka, then you can probably just take a train. And actually the same would probably apply if you land at Haneda. But if you're landing from Narita, just trust me on the Kaikyo bus line. Just please trust me. You will not regret it. But if you're landing in the other two, you should take trains. That said, and with those trains, you can typically pay with this. Now, so that's that kind of stuff. Now, once you get to your hotel or whatever it is, make sure you're using your phone. Your phone will just kind of give you basic GPS information, and you'll be good. I promise you'll be good. Japan is super easy once you figure it out. They are so smart. They are so ahead on the train system thing. The initial it can be intimidating. I know, I went through it. But once you get past that, you're like, wow, this is the smartest, best system ever. Especially I'm telling you, invest in Google Maps. Just pay attention to it. It knows what platforms you got to go to. It knows what time the train's going to be there. It tells you all the connections. You will not get lost unless you can't operate Google Maps. You will be fine. But always make sure you have the Suica card on you. Now, the way the Suica card machines work when it comes to the trains is there's basically these things you just have to pass through, and there's always this big plate type of thing. All you got to do is take this and just kind of scan it over there, and it'll beep and you're good to go. If you don't have sufficient amount of funds on your card, the little doors will shut And you'll have to go back around, and there's this little machine where you can pay the difference. You can put in more money on the Suica card and reload, and you're good to go. The same applies when you arrive at your destination. When you get there, you have to go through the same type of machine. So once again, scan this, and it will deduct the amount based on the distance traveled, or they have some system for this, but based on the amount of distance, essentially, that you went, that's how much it knows to deduct. So highly recommend that you do that. And again, always have some cash on you just to cover these situations. But for the most part, you won't really need it. But if you ever do need more, again, find a 7-Eleven. Trust me, it won't be hard. They have more prominence than Starbucks does in the United States or Tim Hortons does in Canada. It's ridiculous how many 7-Elevens there are. But go to one, hit up an ATM if you really need to. But the problem with that is after you get out of cash, you run into like these little worthless coins. God, I have so many of these stupid things. I hate cash. It's just a personal, like these are basically pennies. These are 1 yen coins. I have a couple of 5 yen coins. There's about the equivalency of like 28 cents here. And I can't really do anything with it because nothing accepts these coins. You will get bigger coins like the 10 yen, the 50 yen, the 100 yen, the 500 yen. Those are actually useful, and you can throw them into the Suica card, which I digitize them the first chance I get. These I can't do anything with. Basically not even money. But that's just me pet peeving about it. Now, so let's talk about a few other things. The Suica card, hopefully you got a full sense of that. I can't recommend it enough. Let's talk about language stuff. Because there are certain phrases, I do not speak Japanese, but I have picked up a lot of phrases while I've been there. And so a lot of them are really useful. Number one that you want to have is sumimasen. Say it again. Su-mi-ma-sen. Say it with me. Su-mi-ma-sen. What it essentially means is, or sorry, or excuse me, which is something you're going to need because you're going to be bumping into people and you're not really going to know how to communicate. So sumimasen, especially with probably a foreign accent, they'll look at you and know you're foreign, but you know what I mean? Like it's important. It's a good one to have. And then I've picked up various phrases over time. Some of my favorites are hai, which is yes, ie, which is no, although I very rarely ever use that one. Hai is important because it's just an acknowledgement of whatever situation. Again, they're not going to expect much from you because you're not from there, and they know that, so they're much more willing to work with you. And Japanese often, they'll kind of make it seem like they don't speak English, but a lot of the time they do, or they at least speak better English than they let on. So there's not really ever been much of a problem. But you have to understand Japanese culture. They don't want to embarrass themselves, and they don't want to embarrass you. So that can lead to some moments where it's like, the guy knows how to explain it to me in English, but he doesn't feel comfortable doing it because he might think his accent isn't good enough or whatever, and that would embarrass him, and that might embarrass you, and like it's just a thing. So it's easier if you pick up just a few phrases and a few just contextual clues to get through it. So a few phrases. One that I like a lot is wakarimashita. 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 What it means is I understand. So if you say, hai, wakarimashita, yes, I understand. That's important because when they're trying to communicate something with you, assuming you actually do understand the situation, you can say that and it's good. Reverse, wakarimasen, where it ends with an N, wa-ka-ri-ma-sen. You can think of it with an N, means no, as in I don't understand. So that phrase means I don't understand, which is a good one as well because if you can't speak Japanese, you can say, sumimasen, wakarimasen, nihongo. Nihongo, which means Japanese, the language. Not the people, not the country, the language. So if anybody says like way too much to you and you're just like, okay, I can't keep up anymore, sumimasen, wakarimasen, nihongo. Now the grammar of that might not be great, but they will understand what you are attempting to say, which is that you don't understand them because you don't understand Japanese. These are useful phrases. Wakarimasu ka, which would be like asking the question, like, do you understand? Although that's probably not a good one to use because then they might elaborate and you're not going to be able to follow it. Arigato Gozaimasu, which is I'm sure the one that everyone knows, just thank you very much. You can shorthand to arigato. Arigato. Arigato Gozaimasu. You can't say that enough. That's actually a really useful one because that'll kind of get you through everything. Just politeness. Be polite. It's so useful. It's so nice. And it's just, it reflects better on everybody when there's politeness involved. We can get into some of the more complicated phrases. If you're buying something and somebody, let's pretend for a second personally, when I buy stuff, I don't want plastic bags. So I didn't know how to communicate this other than just hold my bag up and see it, and I just pointed my bag like, no, I don't need a bag, which of course is like lunatic. So my friends actually taught me how to say this, which is, there's a phrase you can say if anybody's trying to hand you something on the street, and then you can build upon that phrase. So if somebody's handing you something on the street, like, oh, here's a little flyer or whatever, you don't want it, say, Dai Jo Bu Des. Daijobu desu. Meaning, no, I'm good. I don't need that. Dai Jo Bu Des. Dai Jo Bu Des. I'm good. I don't need that. But there's a way to add to that in the event you don't want a plastic bag. So after you've learned that phrase, the first part of that phrase you can learn is tape o de daijobu desu. Tape o de daijobu desu. It basically means just put some tape on it, I'm good. As in, and contextually, they will understand that you mean I don't want a plastic bag. You don't have to, like, I asked about the same question because I was like, well, doesn't that literally just mean put tape on it, I'm good? And it's like, yes, but socially that means you don't want a plastic bag. There's a more formal way of saying you don't want a plastic bag, but there's no reason to do it that way because this will be understood as I don't want a plastic bag. And side note, I learned that part, the tape day part, on my previous trip, and I only knew how to say daijobu desu, like I'm good, but I could only wait until they started to bring out the plastic bag for that to be understood. And so when my buddy taught me this, it's like, oh, it sets up a whole new parameter, like right at the beginning of the conversation, right at the beginning of the transaction. I can tell them that, and they never even bother trying to take a bag out. It's great. Also, the Japanese will want to put tape on things. They'll want to put plastic bags and everything and tape them up. They're very formal about it. You can get away with it sometimes because you're foreign, but you can see it kind of drives them a little nuts. So, teppei daijobu desu, you're going to just reduce that dude's stress. So make sure you learn that one if you're buying stuff. This is not so much language as it is just kind of a cultural thing. You have to understand credit cards over there are a relatively new concept. I know that sounds weird, but a couple of years ago, my first trip there was multiple times where I was the first person who had ever used a credit card with certain employees. Like I had a buddy who spoke Japanese and he was communicating that with them. And they were like, yeah, sorry, I've never had to use a credit card before. I have no idea how this thing works, like blah, 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 blah. And they were figuring it all out. It's a new thing that they're kind of doing more so to prepare for the fact that the Tokyo 2020 Olympics are around the corner and they want credit card compatibility. It makes sense. Like I said, they're more of a cash-based culture, but they're getting there. So keep that in mind. But as a result, there's certain social quirks that come into this that you may not be anticipating. So I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of paying for something in installments. Like let's say you go to a store and you want to buy a giant television that's like, $2,000. You might want to pay in installments where you pay like, I don't know, $100 a month until the whole thing's paid off or whatever the deal is you strike with said store. The Japanese don't know exactly when to ask you that, like when that makes sense. So there's been times where it's like, I'm buying a bottle of water and they'll basically ask me if I want to pay in installments. Now, I don't know the specific phrasing they're using, but if you're ever at that point where you're paying with a credit card and then they just kind of stop and they just say a whole bunch of stuff, and they generally will have the word credito in there somewhere, credito. It'll be in there somewhere, and then they just kind of wait. Then you know that they're asking you how many installments you want. So you need to be able to respond. And a simple way to respond is just say the number 1. Just say ichi. Hold the finger up and say ichi. And they'll proceed, and you'll be fine. I highly recommend that you learn at least how to count to 10. That can be really useful when you're pointing at things, if you're ordering multiple items or something like that. You'd be amazed how useful numbers are. So let's go over numbers real quick. We're going to go from 1 to 10. Ichi, ni, san, shi, go, roku, shichi, hachi, ku, ju. Ichi, ni, san, shi, go, roku, shichi, hachi, ku, ju. 1 through 10. Ichi, ni, san, shi, go, roku, shichi, hachi, ku, ju. Hopefully you got that. But yeah, that's 1 through 10. So hopefully it's useful to have numbers. I promise you it's much more useful than you would expect. So that's all fine and good right there. And then a lot of the time when you're like trying to order stuff, this won't be as intimidating as you think because a lot of places you can use what are called gaijin benefits. Gaijin means foreigner, and get used to that term because it describes you. When you're there, gaijin is you. You are not from there. You're not part of the group. You're allowed to be there. I kind of describe it as like Japan's like a beehive, and you're like a visiting different type of insect that's in there. You're allowed to be there, but you're not part of the hive. That's kind of how it is. So that'll come with advantages and disadvantages. One of the social advantages is there's a low bar set for you. You don't have to do traditional Japanese norms because they don't expect you to know them. They don't expect you to understand them. They do not expect you to speak Japanese. So it's usually kind of surprising when you actually speak some. And you don't have to... It'll also come with other weird benefits that you can argue are good or bad depending on your perspective. Personally, when I get on a train... I've noticed, and this is true of the other people that I hang out with there, which are always fellow gaijin who are actually living there or visiting there, they don't really have traditional Japanese friends. They have Japanese workers, but co-workers and stuff like that, but they don't actually typically make a whole lot of friends because it's just different. But that comes with things. For example, as a tourist, I'm different. So I get to go on the train, it's fine. I traditionally let Japanese people take all the seats. Now that's just more of a me thing. You don't have to do that. But sitting near you is going to be the last option for them. They won't really want to do that. There will be a lot of space around you until there is no choice but to take that space up because you're different. You're not part of the hive. So they kind of want to stay away from you for a while. Get used to it. They're not going to, you're going to get stared at. You're going to get a lot of looks. They're not used to you. And the Japanese are more used to us than everybody else, but at the same time, you're going to get a lot of like, what's gaijin doing here? Unless you're in the super touristy areas, which we'll get back to that. I hate the super touristy areas. But anyway, so be aware of those type of things. If you were to live there, that's when you start running into actual problems. Like there's things like, if you don't speak Japanese, there's a lot of places that just will not allow you into the restaurant or whatever it is. It's like, no gaijin. This means no, by the way. If you ever see a Japanese person do this, it means no. Which, funny enough, for video game fans, Xbox literally meant no box. Terrible, terrible understanding of the Japanese culture. But anyway, so if you ever see one do that, they're trying to communicate that no, like that can't be a thing. And so, just be aware of those types of things. If you were to live there, it's kind of a real issue because if you don't speak the language or whatever, they'll deny you access. If they're legally allowed to do that based solely on the fact that you don't speak Japanese, or even you aren't Japanese as far as ethnicity. Like, it's okay. Like, I have a buddy who's living there, and he told me, like, yeah, I tried to move in this one area, but I made sure to tell him in advance, like, I'm not Japanese. I speak Japanese, I understand Japanese, I live here, but I am actually originally from the U.S., and I'm an American, whatever. And the guy's like, that's unacceptable. I do not want whites living near me. Like, that's a thing. Just be aware. You're not going to go to those places. You're going to you're a tourist. It's different, but be aware that element does kind of exist. But I've never personally had any issues whatsoever in that type of way. And if you're feeling like you really kind of want a more really American-ish experience, like you're getting somewhat homesick, I don't know how else to put it, don't forget that U.S. naval bases are still there. Yokosuka, that whole area has got a big one there. So like that place is weird because it's like half America, half Japan. I almost look at it like if Disney decided what Japan's culture was supposed to be like, it would be Yokosuka. It's weird. But you can go there and everybody definitely speaks English there. If you want to thank someone for buying you food or if you want to thank someone for making you food, go ichisu sama deshita. Go ichisu sama deshita. Go ichisu sama deshita. It's a very formal, very polite thank you for providing a meal, which either, again, means in the context of paying for it or physically like someone making it for you. When it comes to buying stuff, let's get into this. Buying stuff in Japan, let's go over the tax-free thing because I feel like that's something that doesn't get enough coverage. Japan has 8% sales tax. Actually, I think literally today that I'm recording this video, they increased the percentage to 10% sales tax. Now, people living there have to pay that. As a tourist, you debatably don't have to. So the way this works is if you go into different stores throughout Japan, you'll see this sign. Now, Japan tax-free shopping, again, you'll see this in all sorts of stores all over the place. Usually the only places you're going to want to use this in is, frankly, places where you're going to want to spend some real money because there's some conditions to this. First, again, you have to be a tourist, but also you have to spend at least 5,000 yen in the store. 5,000 yen is about $48. Now, again, video game channel, I buy a lot of stuff, so it's not that hard to cross that threshold. But other places like 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven actually does do this. The problem is you are never going to spend $48 at 7-Eleven in one go. And if you do, you have a problem. And we'll get back to that in a little bit. But assuming you've crossed that threshold, you've spent basically 48 bucks or so or more, what happens is you have to mention it. They rarely do it on their own because it's a whole bunch of paperwork for them and they don't want to do it, but they will. So you just either say tax-free or you point at the sign, that type of thing. And so what you need to be prepared for is at that point, you need to have your passport out. And it generally helps because one thing they're going to flip through your passport and look for is the landing sticker for this particular trip. In my case, that gets a little confusing because I have a bunch of Japanese landing stickers, so they're always like, oh shit, which one? So I help them by just finding it. Just anything I can do to reduce these guys' stress, I'm going to do. So I go ahead and I find a sticker for them like that one, and I'll just do them a favor. So what they're going to do is go ahead and they're probably going to ask, like, can I take your passport? And just say, like, hi, just yes. And just wait for, the social cue. And then they're going to go ahead and fill everything out that they need to fill out. Sometimes there will be situations where they want you to write parts of it. I don't know, sometimes it just happens. But anyway, they'll do all this paperwork, and then one of two things will happen. They will either give you they'll either charge you the full amount and then give you the tax back in cash, or they won't charge you the tax in the first place, depending on, again, how you're paying. I pay with credit cards, so that's typically what happens is, I'll pay the full amount, then they give me a bunch of change back, which is generally how I end up with money, actually, in cash, and then I throw that onto the Suica card the first chance I get. Or, like I said, they won't charge you in the first place, so that's actually my preferred method, but either way, that'll happen. Japan has the best tax-free shopping system in the world, because let's just follow this part up. When you get back to the airport, this is kind of voluntary, because what happens is after they fill out all this paperwork, they will stamp it into your passport, or I'm sorry, they'll staple it into your passport or tape it to it. They might ask you if that's okay. Just say yes, because they have to do it, otherwise they can't do this. The system breaks down. So just say yes. Hi, yes. Hi, wakarimashita. It's okay. Yes, I understand. And then they'll just do your thing. Then you're carrying around this receipt. Now, technically, like any place where you do tax-free shopping, there's a rule where, okay, you can't take the stuff out of the bag for some reason until you've gone through customs, which is totally not true in Japan. Like, it's a rule, but they don't enforce it at all. So feel free to take your items and go ahead and use your items. So when you get to the airport, we're following this up here, right before you go through customs, there's a little area all the time where there's just somebody waiting to pick up your receipts. Now, as far as I can tell, this is basically voluntary. I go there because A, I don't need the receipts, but B, like, I just want to function within their society. I don't want to cause any sort of issues. But I know people who've gone to Japan have just completely forgot to do it, and there's no consequences. Like, there are none. It's basically voluntary, but you should just do it because they apparently want those receipts. So I'll go over there, and there's this box. It's like a garbage can. It's like literally a garbage can. You take the receipts out, and sometimes they'll even have somebody who does it for you. In fact, a lot of the time they will. Again, they told you, they employ people to do a lot of strange stuff. You hand them your passport, they'll go ahead with this little like staple remover, and then they'll take the sticker, the receipts out, throw them in this like garbage can, hand you your passport, and say, have a safe flight, and that's it. Like, then you leave and go through customs and all that stuff. So can't recommend it enough. You can save a lot of money. It's wonderful. Let's talk about food. Now, when it comes to food, I should know, I'm chunky, which is a nice way of saying fat. But anyway, so there's a perception in Japan that food is really expensive there. It's not true at all. It's really expensive if you go to like super fancy places, like any place in the world, or if you want beef. Like that one actually is true. But everywhere else, like, get your food at a convenience store, or go into like hole in the wall, like, udon places, or, sushi places. There's a great chain called Kura Sushi. They're not super common, unfortunately, but it's wonderful. Conveyor belt sushi place. It's like 100 yen a plate, so it's like 90 cents a plate. You just take whatever you want, and it all comes in and like on this, this conveyor belt system. Take anything you like. And if you can't find the thing you want, they have a little menu up there, and you can order whatever you want. A separate little train system brings it to you. You take it down. Not even an additional fee for it. It's still the 90 cents. It doesn't make a difference. Unless it's a specialty item or something. But, you know, I can't recommend enough. Kura Sushi. If you like sushi, go to Kura Sushi. Which is essentially, it's like Japanese McDonald's. It's just fast food, but it's really good. They obviously have all the American fast food chains and stuff like that, the ones you would expect. They're big on McDonald's, KFC, Wendy's, stuff like that, which as an American I have no interest in doing, but it's kind of interesting to see, like, they get a lot of crazy flavors of stuff and new versions of things that we never get. So those are kind of interesting to try from time to time. But if you want more of the local stuff, you can go to things like Sukiya, which again is another McDonald's type of thing, but it's a very Japanese McDonald's type of thing. It has a lot of traditional Japanese, like pork and rice-based dishes and stuff. I love that place. They always have an English menu, and they're usually open 24 hours a day. So if it's 3 in the morning, you can't adjust to the time zone yet or whatever, find yourself a Sukiya, just go have a wonderful late-night cheap dinner. I think that's great. Those places, particularly in certain areas, will be better about the English thing, but again, it really helps to just go in and just kind of know a little bit to get through stuff. If you really are just scared or whatever, just say, "Sumimasen, wakarimasen nihongo," like just from the offset. Like, you know, it'll be established. They'll probably figure that one out without you having to say it, but it helps. Just like, you know, say like English menu. You can say that in English. Sukiya will almost always have an English menu that they'll whip out. Sometimes they'll volunteer it. Like if you go to a Starbucks, which you should go to a Starbucks. I'm not kidding about that. Like, I know I'm an American. I don't even really like Starbucks coffee, but you should go to a Starbucks in Japan. I'll get back to that. But like if you go to a Starbucks, a lot of time they will literally walk up. Oh, it's Gaijin. Let's walk up to him and just hand him an English menu because he's stupid. Again, you can use the fact that you're not from there to your advantage. Like they'll try to make your life easier for you in that sense. The reason you should go to Starbucks, if you're ever like walking around Japan and you're just like stressed out, it's too hot, you need to sit down, you need to use a bathroom, you need Wi-Fi, find Starbucks. Starbucks, to me, I joke that it's basically American embassies. You know, you look for that little logo, which is almost the equivalency of our flag, you find it. Starbucks is not going to kick you out. They're going to have air conditioning. They're going to speak English. They're going to have Wi-Fi. They're always going to have some crazy drink that only Japan gets. They're going to have power outlets. You can chill and just relax and just, okay, I'm good. And Starbucks is pretty common there too. Public bathrooms are a thing. It's not like, say, no offense to the UK, finding a public bathroom in the UK is like brutal without paying for it. As an American, I just can't do that. I just cannot pay to use a bathroom. I think that's like morally reprehensible. Like that's messed up. But Japan, typically, you know, it's the fast food chains will have that kind of thing. But Starbucks is always the sweet spot, man. They're always the best about that type of thing. So yeah, you'll be good with that type of thing. They take credit cards. Again, most places will take credit cards, but there are certain situations where you'll get to a place that doesn't. Yoshinoya is another Japanese fast food chain, kind of like a Sukiya. They actually exist in the U.S. now, though the U.S. versions are horrible. Holy shit. Like, I've had them in L.A. Terrible. But they like are half and half on the whole credit card thing. But there are some places that will accept a Sukiya card in lieu of a credit card. They're like, we don't take Visa or MasterCard, but we'll take a Sukiya card. There's vending machines that will take these things as well, so keep that in mind. That can be pretty useful. So that's some basic like food tips, but do not sleep on 7-Eleven or Family Mart or any other like Japanese fast food, or sorry, convenience store chain. Those places always have preset meals available. They're really good and they're usually really cheap. Like I remember the first time I was in Japan looking at these things and I'm like, am I doing the exchange rate wrong here? Because that's like $2 for a whole meal. No, it really is. It's insane. The food is actually comically cheap there, and it's actually really good. In fact, you're actually paying more than you should be because it's convenience fee. If you go to like a real grocery store, you'll have way more options. It'll be even cheaper than that. Eating is not a hard thing to do in Japan. There is a lot of great stuff, and a lot of it's really cheap. Not surprisingly, some of the best places, like there's this wonderful like udon place in Osaka that I would love to go to, and it's like I can't even describe how wonderful it is. Like, incredible food, super nice people. You get a little bit of Japanese language in there. It's just like everybody's just like, yeah, all right, we're all clicking here. And then you get this giant bowl of food, giant bowl of udon, and it's like $2.50. And you're like, this is like, it's just like, it has no right to be that good to be that cheap. It's ridiculous. So food is not really a problem unless you're actively seeking out super expensive things, which you shouldn't be doing. So let's get into that phase of things, because we're going to talk about now the super touristy spots, because that's what everybody wants to do, especially gamers, man. Everybody's like, oh, I want to go to Akihabara. Do not go to Akihabara. Do not, unless you're there for the spectacle aspect. That's different. See, Akihabara, to those who are just watching this for tourism guide information, Akihabara is like nerd mecca. A lot of people want to go there just to be like, oh, look, they have all the video games, they have all the anime, they have all this, blah, blah. It's spectacle in the same way Times Square is spectacle in New York, but it's actually a terrible place to go. It's constantly congested, and it's got all the lights and everything, which is great, but it's like, it's insane. And prices there are astronomical compared to what they are just outside of it. So if you want to go there just to look at stuff, that's one thing. But I tell this to everyone who's actually there to buy video games specifically, don't do it in Akihabara. Just don't. Like, the same weekend that I was there couple weeks ago, I found a copy of Shenmue in Akihabara. $27. I found the same game at a Hard Off a few days later, $4.50. And that's just one example. Like, it's always like that. And they know that, but the problem is tourists go in there and they're like, whoa, this is better than eBay. It's like, yeah, it's 30 on eBay, it's 27 in here. It's like $4.50 like out there. But you're in here. Why? So in there, you get like the touristy stuff. It's nice spectacle. It's great to go into Super Potato and look at all these rare items, but I'm begging you, unless it's like something in the discount bin that actually legit is a good deal, don't buy anything. It's just not worth it. But whatever. I know a lot of people go there for the fun of it. They just like that environment, and that's cool. I'm not here to tell anyone how to enjoy their trip, but if you are specifically there to buy things, you are a fool. So don't do that. There's so many better ways to get stuff in Japan, but Akihabara is where people are comfortable because they've heard of it, and because there's that whole like, oh, they speak English, and I know what this is, but I'm telling you, you're a sucker if you buy stuff in there, so don't do it unless you really want to. But that's that. Personally, because I've become so comfortable with the train systems, and trust me, you will be if you just try using them for a little bit, they are so easy. You can, use Google Maps and be like, oh, here's a store I want to go to, have Google Maps find a route for me, boom, 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 that's all I got to do. There's nothing. It's nothing. It is so easy within the Tokyo Bay Area. It's not like the U.S. I've started to learn this about the U.S. The U.S. is very utterly dependent upon the car for transportation. Japan cannot do that, so everything is the train. And it makes sense. It's much better. You don't have to rely on cars at all. In fact, like I said earlier, you should never even try to get in a car. It's so prohibitively expensive. It's insane. And they have like tolls and everything that are ridiculous. So trust me, you wouldn't want to do that. If you want to talk about strange foods, of course, there is the things like where you want to go and pick up all the weird Kit Kats. I love doing that. There's also a lot of weird different foods of American branding. I mean, Kit Kat's British, but like Snickers does some weird stuff over there. Oreo does some weird stuff over there. And I once asked, like, why is that? Like, why does Japan go so nuts? There is a very specific story behind Kit Kat, but in general, Japanese life, this is what I've been told, Japanese life is very monotonous, and so the weird snack foods are kind of a way to break up the day. Think of it almost like a cigarette break. But as an American, I find it more fascinating just to try these different flavors of things. My opinion. But yeah, again, if you can learn just, more words in Japanese, specific foods, work on your accent, that always helps. My accent, from what I'm told, is too good for someone who can't speak Japanese. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back there. It actually does create some problems for me. So like, one time I was buying something at a store, and I got through my normal parts. It was like, konnichiwa. There's, by the way, Ohayo gozaimasu. Ohio, like the state. Ohayo gozaimasu. Good morning. Konnichiwa. Konnichiwa. Good afternoon. Gonbonwa. Good evening. Or good night. Make sure you learn those, and make sure you know the time of day in which to say them. Don't just be like, konnichiwa! It's not always socially relevant. That'd be like me saying good afternoon to you at 3 in the morning. It just doesn't make sense. So just, learn. Konnichiwa, again, afternoon. Gonbonwa, evening. Ohayo gozaimasu, morning. That's the one, frankly, that I've used the most. I feel like after that I taper off a bit. But anyway, those are important to learn. So I started off a conversation like that. I believe at that point in the day it was konnichiwa. And so I said that, and it's like, hi, wakarimashita, I understand, yes, ichi, one transaction. Then the guy just proceeds to start speaking a lot more, and I don't know what he's saying. And then I just said, I just kind of said like, sumimasen, wakarimasen nihongo. And he just kind of stopped for a bit. He was like super confused. And then he just said a lot, and I heard the word nihongo in there. And basically what I figured out is, and this was through a buddy of mine, but basically what I figured out was that my accent was good enough and I was that good enough at those key points in a conversation that the dude thought we were having a conversation until he realized I couldn't actually speak the language. So there was this look on his face like, is this guy messing with me or something? It would be if like this whole video I'd been speaking Spanish the entire time, and out of nowhere I just went like, yo man, how you doing? Are you good? Is everything all right? Is everything okay? And I said that in English, and you'd be like surprised at how good I said that or how well I said that. And then you'd be like, wait, you speak English? And I'm like, ¿qué? What? No, understand. It would be really weird, like to have that part be really solid and the rest of it's just like. So he kind of thought I was messing with him. So first world problems. But anyway, learn some of these phrases so that you can get through these type of moments. But like most of my stuff is based on the situation of buying things or just greeting people, because that's really all I have. You know what I mean? Certain things I learned when it comes to language is because I guess I have an ear for languages, is what I'm told. I learned most of it just by listening to other people speak it, which is the best way to do it. But one problem I ran into is I didn't know that there was a female and a male accent, and apparently there is. Most of what I was hearing, and most of the time people who I was interacting with were, frankly, women who run convenience stores. So when I was buying stuff, women have a very distinct way of speaking. They kind of hold an accent. So instead of Ohayo gozaimasu, they go Ohayo gozaimasu. They hold on it. So I was kind of learning it that way, and I was saying stuff that way. And then a buddy of mine pulled me aside. He's like, dude, it's not that they don't understand you or whatever. Like, they all get you. You also are foreign. You're gaijin, whatever. They're going to, they're going to give you a pass. But I'm just letting you know, you sound like a fruit. I'm like, he's like, only women do that thing, so you got to stop doing that. So I stopped doing that. But, there's funny things. So you'll run into that too. Import duties and taxes and all that kind of stuff. As an American, technically, we're supposed to have that, but I've never seen it enforced whatsoever. So, like, when I buy a bunch of stuff and bring it back to from Japan back to the U.S., there's supposed to be some sort of import fee or whatever, but literally, they've never asked. I've never had to pay anything. It's a donut. I've never run into that whatsoever. That's, again, as an American, I know other countries, the Canadians, the British, much more strict about that type of thing. Americans, I've even been told this once at a Canadian border crossing going back into the U.S., the guy was just like, I crossed the border, and he's like, how much did you spend while you were in Canada? Keep in mind, if you stay over $800, I have to charge you a fee, so if you don't wish to be charged a fee, please lie to me. And I was like, he was so, direct about it, which I hadn't spent that much anyway, but he was just like, I couldn't believe how, they don't want to do the paperwork. They don't want to do the paperwork in the U.S., so I've never dealt with that problem even once. Can't speak to other countries, though. I'm holding this book off card here, so let me give you this as a little piece of advice. A lot of places will use what you would call a point card, you know what I mean? They actually call it that, pointo card. Like, they say it in kind of, Japanese phonetic English. And this is specifically for a chain called Book Off. Now, I love Book Off. I bought tons of video games and stuff like that there. They also obviously sell, books as well as magazines and Blu-rays and DVDs. Incidentally, do not buy Blu-rays or DVDs in Japan. They are really expensive. Really expensive. It's actually really strange. Video games are cheap, but not Blu-rays and video games. Blu-rays and DVDs. A lot of places will have point club cards. Because I don't speak Japanese, I never sign up for these things. One time I was at a book off with one of my buddies who did speak Japanese, and he signed me up. So basically all I ever have to do is just scan this every time, and then you just accumulate points. And then it gives you a discount later. Of course, I don't know how to redeem it, so I have to have someone else who speaks Japanese. And last time I was there, I was in a book off, and my buddy was with me. He's like, yeah, I'll tell him, and you scan it and redeem the points on there, save a few bucks. But a lot of places do that, but this is the only one where I ran into that. There will be, this happened to me exactly one time, but be prepared for the possibility of, if you ever played Shenmue, when you go into a convenience store and you buy something, a lot of the time they'll pull this like little box out and you stick your hand in and you pull out like a piece of paper and it says if you want a prize or not. The first time I was ever in Japan, day one, the first place I ever went to after the hotel, dropped my bags off, I was like, I'm gonna go get some food, and I walked down to a convenience store. I go in, I bought little bit of food, and then she just whipped the box. I'm like, oh good, I played Shenmue, so I get this. I know what I'm supposed to do. I pull the thing out. I can't read it. I have no idea if I won, I lost, I don't know what's up. And then she's like sitting there obviously explaining the whole thing to me and knowing I do not know what she's talking about. So what she looked at the little paper, and apparently I won a bottle of water, like an orange flavored water, which was dope. She went off and got it, and then she's like, here you go. Like, and I was like, wow. That never happened to me again. But it might happen to you, so be prepared for that possibility. But again, the biggest thing is you're not from there, and they know that, and they're very accommodating to that. There's a lot of pointing and stuff like that you can do, but just don't be rude about it. Just basic rules apply. Don't be a jerk. Just be a good person, and just remember some of these tips. There's a lot of little social cues you'll pick up on just by looking at people. Like one thing I learned is, I wear a backpack a lot of the time. Whenever I'm walking around Japan, I always have a backpack on in case if I buy anything, I can throw it in the bag. Wearing a backpack inside of a store is a little frowned upon. So what I do is I take the backpack off and I kind of hold it by the handle and I put it down. The reason for that is the aisles can become congested and you're just taking up a lot of space. And the same goes for when you're on the train. Just take the backpack off. This is not something in the States that is really required. It's kind of common sense, but there it's not required either, but it's more encouraged to be aware of these type of social cues. So I give you advice like that. One thing that you might run into, I run into this problem a lot, is finding a place to charge my phone. Like I said, you can look for one of our embassies, a Starbucks, but a lot of time train stations will just have a random outlet. The Japanese never use them for that purpose. Only gaijin would think to do that because we're weird, but you can get away with it because you're weird. So I do it all the time. I'll just go and find like a vending machine that has an outlet nearby. I'll just plug in my phone and just stand there like, hey, I'm an idiot. I don't understand that I'm not supposed to do this, which I totally do. But nobody talks to you. Nobody cares. You can just charge your phone in peace and then leave. So you can do that and just get away with it as long as you look kind of dopey, but like harmless dopey. Don't be a dick to anybody. Just don't be a dick. Another one that's kind of useful if you're trying to be polite, if you're in a store and like especially if there's elderly people, they really respect the elderly. So if you're in a line or something and you're not in a rush, and there's an old person, you can turn to them and say like dozo, just means next, like go ahead, like it's fine. Just try to make them like us more, because you got to try. And my buddy said it best. He's like, when he goes to Japan, he has to try twice as hard to be half as good, and that's definitely true there, because you're automatically not as good just by the virtue of the fact that you're not Japanese. So just don't be a jerk. Just get in there and just be helpful if you can, and be respectful, and you'll be fine. You will be fine. You will have a great time in Japan. But just learn these little social cues that will really help you out in these moments. So dozo is a great one. It's a great way of being polite and it's probably not technically grammatically accurate. It's not necessarily the best thing to say, but they will understand what you're saying and they will appreciate the effort, and then you'll be able to, just push that situation through. I use it a lot when I'm not in a rush, either if it's at like, a restaurant or something and you see like an old person, or if there's like one time, like one guy and I were going up to the rice maker at the same time at the breakfast buffet, and I've just let him go first. Dozo. Just let them go. Just let them do their thing. And just, be respectful, be polite. It's really not that hard. Oh, I guess we could talk a little bit about exit. There's not much to it. When you go back through customs on the departure, they just changed this, by the way. What it used to be is you'd go through passport control and they would, look at your passport and stamp you and you're good. They just automated this. So now I just scan my passport and then it opens a little door and I go through. The only time you talk to a person now is if you have a problem, which means you no longer get an exit stamp. What used to happen is you get that sticker at the beginning and a traditional stamp at the exit. Now it's just the entry thing and no exit stamp, unless you run into problems, I guess, but I didn't run into any problems. So all good there. When it comes to the crazy like drinks and foods, feel free to try whatever interests you. You will see all sorts of vending machines. All the vending machines are crazy and all of them have tons of different stuff, so it's always worth kind of looking at. That is a situation where cash can be useful, but again, a lot of them will accept a Passmo card, so you can be okay with that. Just trying to think about other phrases that I use with some regularity. It's the greetings. You can say, if someone thanks you, or you can say "do itashimashite" as "you're welcome," but it's very rarely used. I don't think I've ever heard Japanese people actually say it. I think I've only ever seen other gaijin use it because we think we're supposed to, but usually a proper response to a thank you is a thank you. So, arigato gozaimasu, arigato gozaimasu. You just say that and move on. The word "and" is the word "to." So if you're like this would be super primitive, but if you have one of those English menus and you want this and this, you can say, sumimasen, ichi, and point it with that, to ichi, like one and one, and then if you want like two of these same drink, and to ni. So stuff like that's useful. Don't forget your phone if you have a Google thing anyway, or Google Apps translates amazing. You can scan stuff. You will be fine. Oh, there's a couple of weird cultural ones, like this is, I guess, does and doesn't matter. Don't leave your chopsticks in your food when you're not eating. It's your gaijin, you don't necessarily know any better, but I'm educating you on the process. If there's food there and you just leave the chopsticks sitting in, it's kind of rude, because that's often done, particularly with a bowl of white rice, that's typically done at like a funeral context only. Not, again, you don't know any better, but if you can avoid it when you're not eating something, put the chopsticks down. It's not a big deal. It's just something that makes you look a little more ingratiated into the culture. It's very acceptable when you're drinking like soup, like ramen or udon or whatever. Slurping is very okay. Just learn chopsticks, by the way, in advance. Do that if you can. They're super easy once you figure them out. But chopsticks will generally be the way things are presented. There's forks and knives and spoons, but you'll look better if you know how to do that. They'll typically offer you the choice. Again, what you call gaijin benefits, they have a low bar for you, so you get away with things normal Japanese would not be able to get away with. Sorry about the random cut there, but I was in post-production on the video and I decided to take to Twitter to see if anybody else had any other random questions or things they were curious about regarding Japan, and it turns out there was actually quite a few, so we're going to talk about that. But also I apologize for the length of this video as well as the structure of it, because it is kind of all over the place, but hopefully it's kind of given you a lot of useful information that will really help you feel more confident when you decide to go there. And we have a whole bunch of stuff here that will help as well, I think. So some of the stuff we're going to go over first is some phrases. I already taught you guys a bunch, hopefully, but some people were asking for more specific stuff, and so I came up with a few more. One that should be rather obvious, but I never even thought to ask it because I've never asked it the entire time I was in Japan, was the ability to say, do you speak English, or do you understand English? Now, in order to do that, it's simple. I already taught you the phrase wakarimasu ka, which is do you understand, and then all you need to do is learn the word for English, which is ego, as in Eggo waffles. So wakarimasu ka ego. Wakarimasu ka ego. Wakarimasu ka ego. And that would be just, do you understand English? The reason it never occurred to me to try to say this anywhere is simply that, frankly, I'm white, so they automatically assume that I don't speak Japanese and that I do speak English, and they volunteer it. I've never been in a situation where I felt it was necessary to make that statement, but technically you can do that. So there you go. Other things like simple stuff like how to say left and right. I actually learned this from Shenmue 2. Anybody who's played Shenmue 2 probably picked this one up. Migi is right, hidari is left. And it's actually very annoying because it should, in my opinion, if you want to like try to find an easy trick to try and remember which is which, it really should be the other way around, because migi has 4 letters, like the word left has 4 letters. Hidari has an R in it, like the word right has an R in it. And, alphabetically, left, it starts with an L, and then the next letter would be M, which would be migi, which starts with, LM. But no, it's actually exactly the opposite. So if somehow knowing those little factoids and then remembering you have to swap it helps you remember the directions, migi is right, hidari is left. And sometimes it's said with hidari da, migi da, like go left, go right. If you want to ask someone to wait a second, which is actually pretty useful if you need a moment to like get out your wallet, or you need a second to just go check something else out, or whatever it is, you want to say choto mate kudasai. Mate is basically wait, and kudasai is please. But basically you're asking like, can you wait a second, or can you please wait a moment, or that type of thing. Choto mate kudasai. Choto mate kudasai. I'm looking at my little notes here. if you want to ask someone to repeat something or do something one more time, you would say mo ichi do onegashimasu. Mo ichi do onegashimasu. One more time, please. Mo ichi do onegashimasu. Mo ichi do onegashimasu. Moichido onegashimasu. One more time, please. So, in the event that someone's like trying to communicate something and you're really trying to hang in there, but you can just be like, sumimasen, chotomate kudasai, moichido onegashimasu. Sumimasen, wakarimasen nihongo. Like, that's kind of a garbled series of words to basically express like, sorry, I don't speak Japanese. Can you just, one more, just hang on a second. Can you just say that one more time? Like that type of thing. But you can basically combine all these phrases and you'll get far. Then there's also the goodbye. Everybody knows sayonara. Sayonara is not really the appropriate thing to say. Sayonara is like goodbye forever. Like it's a very formal, like eternal goodbye. Like you would say it to someone who's going off to war or something. Like you don't really say that. What you say socially, if you're gonna, like see you later, like that type of thing, you say ja mata, and sometimes just shorthand to ja. But ja mata, see you later, that type of thing. So say it with me. Ja mata. Ja mata. As opposed to sayonara. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some social cues. Japan, like most places, if like when you're in the US, right, and you see an escalator, you'll always see people who are like standing on it or walking on it, but there's never really any cohesion to this. And then often you'll have people just kind of road blocking because somebody will just stand on the escalator and stand in the center or whatever it is. And that creates a problem. In Japan, it's very structured. One side is always the standing side and one side's always open. And the open side is for people who want to walk. It's very logical. All of Japan works one way, where everybody stays on one side and then keeps the other side open unless they're walking up it, except Osaka. Osaka does it exactly the opposite way, so keep that in mind. Unfortunately, I don't remember which is which. I think in Tokyo, you stand on the left and you walk up on the right. In Osaka, you walk up on the right you stand on the right and then walk up on the left. That's just Osaka. The rest of Japan does it the other way, where you stand on the left and walk up on the right. And now you can get away with not doing it as being gaijin, but don't do it. You know better. It's just a dick move. Like I've had my mom over there and she'll like stand there and the whole thing, she'll have her luggage in the way and I'm like, no, you're being really rude. Stop that. She's like, oh, I'm old. It's okay. I'm like, no, it's not okay. Like you move the back, like get the hell out of the way. So don't be that guy. Don't do that. You understand the rules. And if you're not sure when you get there, you don't remember which is which, remember that first it is a policy and all you got to do is like just look at an escalator. There will always be Japanese people on them and they'll already have the line formed for you. So just do what they're doing and you'll be fine. Seems like an obvious one, but it's apparently not. Don't be too loud. One thing that, is kind of common here in like the US is, if you go into a store or something with a bunch of friends, you might be like, talking to each other. You might be loud about it. You might be trying to get your buddy's attention who's like down like a couple like aisles over, like, yo, buddy, what's up? Come over here. Don't do that type of stuff over there. It's really weird and it's off-putting. When you're with your friends, just calmly talk to your friends around your friends. You know what I mean? A lot of people asked about lodging, staying in a hotel, staying in an Airbnb, whatever it is. This really is up to you. It's more, up to your budget. Personally, I always go with hotels, although I have a disadvantage or advantage, however you want to put it, is I've never had to really do that myself. Those have been covered. But what I would do is try to get a cheap little hotel room, generally just outside of somewhere significant. Like I said, I like to stay in Yokosuka and I like to stay in Yokohama. But I never stay like in the epicenter part, unless, that's where I've been put. But if I wanted to do that, I would always stay just like a couple train stops away, not super far from it. And then you'll get to the much cheaper hotels. Hotels also, by the way, that whole thing about them being small is not a joke. The rooms can be very, very tiny. The last time I was there, I was in this place in Yokohama. It was perfectly fine, but the room was a closet. Like it was a bed with a tiny table and its own bathroom, and that really was it, which is fine. I just needed to sleep there. I didn't need to live there. So if you're going with multiple people, then you'll have to start looking into bigger options. But honestly, my hotel was like $40 a night. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't significant, and that one was totally acceptable. That was the one I had for Tokyo Game Show. I looked into it, but yeah, that one was fine. And if you need more space, then it's going to start costing you more. I've never done the Airbnb route in Japan. That's just me. I mean, you know, there's also things like little pod hotels and there's hostels. It really depends on your budget. You know, but if you're asking my opinion, I would personally recommend staying at like a real hotel and maybe just cheaping out on which type of room you get in the hotel, as long as you're not like claustrophobic. That's typically the way I would do it, because I like a private bathroom. I like, you know, my own bed. I don't like to share a room with a bunch of strangers. That's me. But that's my suggestion. Also, when you link, if you want to do this, because I've done this before, not in Japan, but in general, you can link hotels.com and stuff like that with, you know, various airlines and things like that. And so even though you pay full price or whatever for the room, you can get a whole bunch of free award miles for flights, or sometimes because you're an airline member, you can also get discounts on rates on rooms. And never underestimate a simple Google search if you're using hotels.com. Never underestimate the Google search for a coupon. You can often find like, you know, 20% off of your entire stay and random things like that actually do work. So you can do that as well. Limited food options so people were asking about like, what if you have like food sensitivities? The truth about Japan is, like I said before, they're very much we do it our way. You can either have it or not. So they're not the best country when it comes to accommodations for food. So if you suffer from celiac disease or you're lactose intolerant or any stuff like that, sorry, like they make something and they make it the way they want to make it, and if you can't have it, that's on you. So you know, you might just have to go to grocery stores and eat nothing but vegetables. I mean, I don't know, but they're not very accommodating to that type of thing. So be aware of that. They make it away, and that's just how it's going to be. One thing, when it comes to like crazier foods, people ask like, you know, what kind of foods should I try that I wouldn't necessarily think of or I think would be weird. First of all, in Japan, I'd say pretty much try anything. Like I've never really had bad stuff except for like natto, that bean stuff. Don't do that. But most stuff you'll be on board with if you just feel kind of experimental. One thing that will throw you is, especially as an American, is the fascination with raw eggs. Japan has extremely strict standards on the quality of their eggs, to the point where you can use an egg essentially as a sauce. Like when I go to Sukiya, for example, I'll order this like green onion, pork, and rice dish, and it always comes with a raw egg. And the raw egg is still in the shell. I haven't done anything with it. What you're supposed to do is it comes with this little like, you know, device that where you crack the egg and then you know, basically put the yolk on the center, and then all like the I forget what it's called, but the stuff around the yolk, the whites, sure, that stuff drains away, and then you're just left with the yolk. Then you pour the yolk onto your food, and then just crack it and just let it spray out and let it be part of the meal like a sauce. And you might be thinking, dude, it's a raw egg. You're not supposed to eat raw eggs. There you can, because they're so well regulated as far as the quality of it. It's not dangerous. It's actually really good. So raw eggs and stuff is actually pretty great. And Japanese eggs in general, like if you want to get boiled eggs or whatever, you'll notice it. Trust me, if you ate eggs in the US and then you eat them in Japan, you will notice how much better the eggs are there. Same goes with the quality of rice and a lot of things in general. And don't sleep on random things like, we were talking a little bit about drinks and sodas and stuff. Don't forget they don't use the chemical crap that we use. Most of the world doesn't, so you can have real sugar versions of sodas and stuff like that. As a little side note, if you're in a convenience store and you decide you want a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola, they have regular, but they also have laxative versions. So be careful with that, though they're high fiber editions. The Coca-Cola one, as I recall, comes in a bottle that's white, and I think the Pepsi one is called like Pepsi Max or something like that. Not the version that we have, but it's like a different bottle entirely. Both of those are literally versions of the soda that have laxatives in them, so that it'll help you, you know, do what you got to do. But don't drink that if that's not your goal. Just don't get it messed up. When it comes to the food orders, like I said, they do things a very specific way, so make sure you're respectful of that. So that whole thing that it's annoying here, but people do, it's much worse there. If you go to a restaurant and be like, I want to order this, but I want to change this and this and this and this and this and this. Don't do that. Just don't do that. That's not going to be a thing. Just, you make us all look really bad if you do that. Just don't do that. Order something you know you're compatible with. Don't order something you have to make changes to. Just don't do it. While we're on the subject of restaurants, tipping is not a thing in Japan, like it isn't in most of the world. But in Japan, if you tip somebody, it can actually be considered insulting because it's like, yeah, don't quit your day job. You need this. So don't tip, even if that's your instinct. You don't have to do it, and you shouldn't do it. Another thing when it comes to eating behavior and drinking behavior is it's not socially unacceptable, but it's considered garish to walk down the street and eat or drink something. Which I didn't know. I was getting a lot of stares over it, and then somebody explained it to me. It was just basically like, look, it's becoming a little more normal to walk down the street and drink something, especially in the summer when it's hot out. It's still considered a little off by the older generation, but food, like, that's really messed up. Like, walking down the street and, like, eating something is just, you're seen as, like, a savage. Like, that's so weird. So what you're supposed to do is, it's not socially unacceptable to, like, stand next to a convenience store, like Jay and Silent Bob style, and just sit there and eat something. But when you're walking with that same something, then all of a sudden it's bad. So, again, there's no law against this. There's no rule against it. It's just you're making us look like idiots when you do it. So be aware of these little social cues. Oh, and this is a small thing, but make sure you know about it. It is legal. It is a legal requirement in Japan that all non-Japanese citizens have their passport on them at all times. I've never needed this for any real reason other than the whole tax-free thing, but just be aware it's not one of those situations where you should leave it in the hotel room. You do require having it. Another one that I was taught was blowing your nose in public is almost like taking a dump in the street. It's just, wow. Again, no one's going to stop you. It's not illegal, although taking a dump in the street might be illegal. But don't do it. Just don't do it. It looks gross to everybody. It's borderline offensive. Go into a bathroom and take care of it. A lot of people are asking about tourist suggestions, so I gotta preface this one by saying I'm a really bad tourist despite how many places I've gone to, but I have to say, like, things like the oldest castle or the biggest ball of yarn or whatever have never been interesting to me. I actually loathe the whole concept of going to see stuff like that. It is not fascinating to me. I wouldn't do it if it was next door to where I live. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. I do not care. So I'm not the best person to ask this particular question to. Like, there's some places you go where you have no choice. It's like obligatory. Like, sure, I'll get the selfie in front of the Eiffel Tower. Cool. I got the selfie in front of Osaka Castle. But beyond that, it's like, no, don't care. You know, and in those instances, you just kind of do it mostly for social pressure. You know, it's like, oh, you have to do it because, you went to Osaka, so you got to go see the castle. But, like, some of the stuff that I've seen over there is purely coincidental. Like, I've seen the biggest Buddha in Japan because the train went past it, and I got off at that train stop because I was trying to get off there anyway. And there it is. I was like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. Like, I don't care. I don't seek that stuff out. But what I will say is, if those are the type of things you are interested in, first of all, no judgment. But if you are, like, it's not hard to get to them. I mean, they know where the money spots are for tourism, so all the trains will go to those types of places. So just find what you want, and it'll take you there. You're not really going to run into that type of problem. But when it comes to Osaka, the definitive one is Osaka Castle. When it comes to Tokyo, problem with Tokyo is it's not really a city. It's a city of cities. Like, it's so densely populated. Everyone thinks of that whole thing as Tokyo, but it's really not. It's like, it might as well be its own country at that point. And then there's a bunch of little cities inside of it, and little, not really little, but so when you think of a downtown Tokyo, having never been there, a lot of people think, oh, maybe it's going to be like a New York or a Chicago or something like that. It's just going to have this big downtown area. You can walk all around, whatever. No, Tokyo really doesn't have that. A lot of that's kind of a remnant of the war. Like, it was basically, flattened, and then they just kind of rebuilt it. And it's all very modern-looking office buildings. There's not really a whole lot of ancient cultural stuff that you need to go look at down there. And then when it comes to, like, super tall buildings and that type of thing, they're still on, like, the fault line for earthquakes, so they don't really build those. So, like, Tokyo Tower, the orange antenna-looking one is kind of the closest thing, but it's not like, say, the Eiffel Tower, where there's a park around it, and you can go walk over, and it's a nice, it's very Japanese efficient. Like, we just put it here, we gotta do this. It's so... Tokyo is not really a city you can just walk around in the downtown type of area, because they literally structured it in such a way that you can't. Everything is built around the train and the car. So there's like literally walls preventing you from getting from place to place to place. So it's like you want to get to a specific spot. There's a train to take you there. You go there, you do that, you leave. And that was explained to me very well. Tokyo is not a city you go to just be like, we should go to downtown Tokyo and just like look around at stuff. No, that's a horrible idea because you will be very disappointed. Tokyo is a city of, okay, I have a reason to go into Tokyo. I've got to go to this one specific place. We're going to go in, we're going to do that thing, we're getting on the train, and we're going to go somewhere else. It's mission objective based. And they structured the city that way because of how densely populated it is. There's no time to have people just hang around. So if you want to do a hang around thing, then you're going back to Akihabara, but then that's just touristy crap, you know, like, and maybe that's what you want, but yeah, I don't like typical touristy stuff, so I'm not the best person to ask about that, but that's my advice in that regard. Yeah, but if you're, I know a lot of people are asking, again, because of what this channel is, a lot of people are asking about video game suggestions. What I always tell people is take the trains and find, you know, hard offs and book offs, which is a series of chains. We already talked about book off a little bit, but hard off is one about hardware. And they'll have a lot of video game stuff, and you take trains to go get to them. Usually, like, I'm not going to say out in the rural areas of the country or anything like that, but at least kind of the outskirts of the Tokyo area, you'll typically have better luck. Prices will be much better, and you will have to do a lot of walking. Keep that in mind. But if you're not opposed to that, sure. That's the other thing about Akihabara is, like, you're already there, so they put all the stuff there. So it's supposed to be convenient, but there is a price for that convenience. So, again, it depends on your goals and your interests and all that type of stuff, but that's up to you. People were asking about electrical requirements, which is a good one. I hadn't even thought of that. The electrical standard in Japan is about 100 volts, whereas the US uses like 110, 120. And so what that means is, at least for us, for Americans and for Canadians, we have the benefit of Japan essentially uses the same power outlet as us, like the two-prong thing. They do not have the third part, the ground. They don't have that. So anything you bring over to Japan from the United States or Canada will work from an electrical standard point. But it will only have two-prong support for the most part. So what that means is you'll have to have a little adapter if you have something like, say, a laptop that has the ground pin and you can't use it over there because generally you're not going to find that third pin. Sometimes you will, but not always. But those little adapters are super easy. Those aren't even like step-down converters. I mean, they're literally just plug adapters because the ground is not really a requirement for the thing to operate. So for Americans and Canadians, using stuff over there is relatively easy. If you're coming from Europe, you're going to run into other problems, in which case you will need a step-down converter to adapt, and generally you'll just use the American version that's probably set on there. But again, that depends on the specific step-down converter you've purchased. But for Americans, not really a big deal. And then when it comes to buying stuff and bringing it back, keep in mind our voltage is a little higher than theirs. So while you can take a Japanese video game console or whatever and just directly plug it into an outlet here, and it will work, over time, the difference in voltage from what it's used to versus what we're giving it is going to start chewing away at the power supply and eventually brick it. So it is recommended, if you intend to use things here for a prolonged amount of time, that you have a step-down converter that will make that slight adjustment from 100 to 120 or 100 to 110, depending on the situation. And then, you know, your stuff will last longer, but that's small potatoes type of thing. Airport security. People ask me about this. So airport security in the US, I imagine a lot of you have a fair understanding of, so we're going to skip over that. But when it comes to Japanese airport security, we already went through the landing. There's really not much to that. But the departure part, if you have things like TSA pre-check or whatever, global entry, that doesn't do you any favors there. That process is basically, the thing that's most important is your ticket, not really the ID. In fact, you don't need the ID until you go through customs. But what they'll do is you'll get up to a person, you'll hand them your paper ticket, and they'll look at it and they'll scan it or whatever, and then they send you on to the next part of security, which is the part where, you know, you put all your stuff in the, you know, the bins, and then you take off your shoes sometimes. It's from country to country. I don't think Japan does the shoes thing, but you do have to take your laptops out. You can't have any liquids or whatever. I've only been to one country that I can think of in a post 9/11 world that didn't care about the liquids, and that was Australia. They actively don't care if you bring liquids on, but everybody else does. So whatever. So yeah, it's pretty much the same process, and the normal things are going to get flagged. Like one time I went through there with my backpack, and my backpack was full of Nintendo 64 cartridges. So from the scanner's perspective, it looked like just a ton of computer boards, which raised a flag. So then the bag comes out, and they have like two guys. Old dude takes my bag, opens it up, and he's just like, you could tell on his face he didn't know what to make of the situation, and he calls over a younger guy. The younger guy looks at it, and he just starts laughing. He's like, because he knew immediately what they were, just Nintendo 64 games, and he's like, "It's gaijin, yeah, it's fine." That's just video. That's what they do. So he didn't. So there was no problems like that. But it's the normal basic rules that you would expect. Somebody specifically brought this up: the toilets. I wouldn't even have thought to mention this, but toilets in Japan are somewhat needlessly complicated sometimes. They have all sorts of features on it. Sometimes it looks like a damn calculator. It's got a whole bunch of stuff. And a lot of that stuff is for like the bidet. You press that and frankly it shoots water up your butt and cleans it. Which you can do. It's up to you. I've done it. It's a little off-putting because you're certainly not expecting it. And then it's supposed to, save on the amount of like toilet paper and stuff that you use, which there is some truth to that, but I've always found that it doesn't quite complete that job. So there's that. The bidet part is generally pretty easy, but there can be some other functions on there that I do not notice or do not know how to use. And sometimes the basic one of how to flush it can actually be surprisingly hard to find, depending on the situation, depending on the type of toilet. But yeah, usually they have butt warmers installed, so you'll sit down and it's always kind of off-putting because it feels like you just got into a bathroom where like a fat sweaty guy had just been in there a minute ago and his like butt warmth is still there. It always feels like that when you first sit down because you're not ready for it. Eventually you accept, oh right, this is a mechanical thing that's doing this on purpose, and you're like, okay, that's kind of nice, I guess. But yeah, it's a little weird. It's also a sanitary thing for them because Asian cultures don't totally get why Western cultures are so cool with just placing your butt where somewhere else's butt was. So at least there, they warm the toilet to theoretically kill off some of the bacteria, which is a sanitary thing, and that actually makes a lot of sense. Japanese bathrooms are usually very nice, very clean, and it's pretty good. But be careful about when you flush stuff, especially in the public bathrooms. This only happened to me one time. I was in a train stop bathroom just taking a piss, and I went, and then I realized I didn't know how to flush this toilet because it wasn't the normal way. It wasn't just like a handle or whatever that was like super obvious. So then I saw a button and I pushed it, and then all of a sudden an alarm started going off, and I realized, okay, that wasn't the right button. There's a different button. So I pushed that, and I realized immediately that that button I had accidentally pushed was basically the women's like assault button in case something's happening in the bathroom. And so that was awkward because I had to come out, and they, of course, the guy realizes immediately nothing's happening, and I apologized as best I could, and he didn't say anything, but you could see it on his face. He's like, stupid gaijin, like you could just see it. Like, I brought us down a point that day, guys. I'm sorry, but you could see it. But so just be careful. Don't push the like alarm button for the toilet. But yeah, other than that, like there's crazy stuff that happens with toilets, but usually the one that's in your hotel is going to be the most friendly. And speaking of like hotel bathrooms, you will notice a difference depending on where you stay. I've stayed in hotels where tourists stay, and I've stayed in hotels where actual Japanese people stay. And there is a difference. A lot of where tourists will stay will have a very traditional bathtub and a very traditional shower. Whereas where the ones where Japanese people stay, pretty different. Because what they do is, and I've seen this a couple of times, and it still perplexes me, is a very traditional Japanese bath is not for the purposes of washing, it's for the purposes of relaxation, hence all the onsens and all that stuff, which, this is a side note, I've never done it, but I know with onsens, that it's traditional that you're naked for those things, and you're not really allowed to have things like tattoos or whatever. It's not really acceptable. It's not a sexual thing. It's, both genders can be in there, or whatever it is. Age ranges doesn't matter. I never did that, but it is a thing. So when it comes to bathing for the purposes of hygiene, the bathtub is not really perceived for that. The shower is, and then there's what I don't know the term for it, but I want to call it a Japanese shower because I don't know how else to describe it, which is basically they'll sit there, like the bathroom itself has like a drain at the bottom, so it's almost like the whole room has the capacity to just have water splash wherever, and it doesn't really matter. But they'll sit there on like a stool, and you like have a sink and you have some soaps and a bucket, and they'll basically like fill the bucket, and then they'll like wash themselves like this, manually, like pouring water over their head, but just kind of sitting there, not ever really immersing the body in water. I don't understand this, but the traditional Japanese hotels like that I've ever been in always have this, and then it's actually kind of hard to take a traditional, like you'll see the bathtub next to it, but there's no like drain for it. There's no like way to put water in it. So I'll try to like finagle a shower together where I'll stand in the tub and I'll like grab the somewhat shower head from the other part and just kind of aim it this way and then try to bathe that way so it goes into a tub, because to me that just makes more sense. But you know, to each their own. And the other thing to warn, Japanese bathrooms, specifically the shower, are really designed for people shorter than me. And I'm not that tall, I'm 5'10". Actually, a couple of times now, I've actually strained my neck in there, just standing there, because you have to like aim, you have to kind of get under the shower thing and stuff. I've actually thrown out a muscle one time, very specifically, and I had to like look up what Japanese pain medication I could find, like muscle relaxers specifically, and then go out and buy one. So be careful of that type of thing. Again, the bathrooms are kind of designed either for shorter people or for people who are sitting. Not necessarily, I'm going to stand and take a normal shower. This is not always the case, but it is the case a lot of the time. And then the last thing that I can think of from this list of people kind of bringing up and just stuff that kind of came to mind is be on the lookout for other gaijin, other tourists, other foreigners. You will know that you have successfully ingratiated enough of the culture that when you see other tourists, you go, oh crap, as opposed to, look, oh, it's my people. And what I mean by that is, you have to understand something. When you see other gaijin, you'll look at them and you'll be like, that person, no matter what they do right now, represents me. Even though I have nothing to do with them specifically, they represent me. So if you see that stereotypical, like, you know, couple that's like out of shape and they're making a lot of noise and they have terrible kids and they're just doing all this crap and they're just being loud and rude and all that type of stuff. Do you speak English? Like those people, they represent you. They make you look bad by them just existing. So when you see anyone else, even if they're not doing anything, you just see anyone else and your instincts, oh shit, you know you've made it because you have to be like worried about that. Not that anybody's gonna do anything to you, but it changes. Your mind changes. It goes from like, oh dude, what's up? You know, you're one of mine, to like, dude, just don't do anything dumb, okay? Please, I like it here. Please don't do anything dumb. Like that mindset will change. And it's true. Like I've talked to the people I know who live in Japan, who are originally from the US, and they all say the same thing. It's like you that changes for you. You get to a point where you see other like gaijin, you're like, you're just as perplexed as the Japanese are when they see you, because you're just like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And then you're just sitting there hoping like, please don't do anything dumb. Please don't do anything dumb. Please don't do anything dumb. So hopefully this has been helpful to people in the event that you're going to Japan or planning to go to Japan. This can be somewhat insightful. I know this is very long, and hopefully that means it's useful. But again, please, you know, write any sort of questions if you have about travel. I'd love to answer them if need be. I know I mentioned Cuba before. There's a lot of people who are very curious about going to Cuba. My previous podcast, at the time I put out this video, I spent a good chunk of time talking about what it's like to go to Cuba and all the stuff you have to do for that. So if anybody's curious, feel free to check that out. And if this is something that interests you guys more, to see videos like this about what it's like to go somewhere and what the process is, I'd be happy to do more like this. Just let me know. So please, if you can, like, comment, subscribe, and all that great stuff. Check out the social stuff in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all there.